You didn't make a reckless decision. Nothing collapsed, nothing exploded. But something in your life quietly changed, and most people don't notice the moment it happens. It usually begins with progress. A raise arrives, not a huge one, just enough to feel different. Suddenly your life opens a little. A better apartment, a nicer neighborhood, furniture that looks like it belongs to an adult, small upgrades that signal you're moving forward. It feels responsible. It feels deserved. It even feels smart. And in many ways, it is. But something subtle forms underneath those upgrades. A quiet dependency, not on luxury, not even on debt, on continuity. Your life begins to require the income that built it, and continuity is expensive. Not immediately, not dramatically, just quietly. Month after month. The strange part is this. The trap almost never appears during crisis. It appears during stability. When everything looks normal, when everything feels earned, when nothing seems risky at all. That's why people rarely see it forming. Because the lifestyle that slowly traps you usually looks exactly like success. You remember when your income first shifted upward, not dramatically, just enough to feel different. A paycheck arrives that's slightly larger than usual. You pause for a moment, you stare at the number on the screen a little longer than normal. And a quiet thought appears. Finally. Movement. Breathing room. Progress. For the first time in a while, things feel like they're opening instead of tightening. Bills still exist. Work is still demanding. But something about the pressure feels lighter. And progress almost always brings adjustment. Not celebration, adjustment. You start looking at things a little differently. The apartment you once tolerated suddenly feels temporary. The furniture that worked before now feels like a placeholder. You begin imagining what life could look like with a little more space, a better apartment, a quieter building, maybe a neighborhood that feels closer to the person you're becoming. Somewhere you feel proud to invite people, somewhere that reflects the progress you've made. The rent is higher. But it makes sense. You're earning more now. Your numbers support it. You didn't make a reckless choice. You thought about it. You ran the numbers. It felt measured, responsible, even mature. And the strange part is that every step along the way feels reasonable. Each change looks small by itself. Each upgrade feels justified. That's usually where the structure begins, not excess. Alignment. At first, everything feels like growth. Your mornings feel calmer. Your kitchen feels more adult. Your couch looks intentional. You invite friends over more often. You say your address out loud without hesitation. Your life feels composed, ordered, upward. Nothing about it feels fragile. You didn't overspend. You didn't lose control. You refined. You improved the environment you live in, and improvement feels good. It feels like progress becoming visible. But refinement does something subtle. It quietly raises the floor of your life. Before the raise, your life required a certain number every month. Rent, groceries, utilities, a few small comforts. The number wasn't tiny. But it was manageable. If something unexpected happened, you could adjust. Shrink a little, wait things out. Now the number is different. Not dramatically larger, just heavier. The nicer apartment adds a little. The upgraded routines add a little. The environment you built requires a little more care. None of these changes feel reckless by themselves. Each one makes sense in isolation. But together they create something new. A higher minimum. Not because you made irresponsible decisions, because you improved things. Improvement quietly increases the baseline of life, and once the baseline rises, your life needs more income just to stay level. Nothing broke, nothing feels unstable. That's exactly why the shift is easy to miss. Before, if something unexpected happened, you could shrink for a while, simplify. Cut back quietly. Maybe you skipped a few dinners out. Maybe you delayed a purchase. Maybe you spent a few months living a little tighter. It wasn't pleasant, but it was possible. Your life had space to contract. Now shrinking would be visible. Shrinking would mean undoing parts of the version of yourself that just leveled up. The nicer apartment. the routines you built, the expectations people quietly attach to your life. So your thinking begins to shift. Not dramatically, just slightly. You don't think about shrinking anymore. You think about maintaining. Maintenance feels responsible. Adult. Stable. You keep the numbers clean. You keep the payments predictable. You keep the structure running smoothly. And at first, it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like maturity. But maintenance is different from growth. Growth expands options. Maintenance protects structure. Growth asks what could change. Maintenance asks what must continue. And once life shifts into maintenance, structure begins to matter more than you realize. Maintenance doesn't feel like pressure, at least not at first. It feels like discipline. Bills are paid. Your calendar stays full. Income supports the structure you built. From the outside, everything looks stable, maybe even impressive. Your life runs smoothly. The apartment is maintained. The routines are predictable. The numbers line up each month. And because nothing is breaking, it feels like success. You tell yourself this is what adulthood is supposed to look like. Consistency, reliability, momentum. But something quiet is now built into your life. Consistency is no longer just helpful. It becomes necessary. Your structure now requires income, not occasionally, continuously. The rent expects it, the routines expect it. The environment you built quietly depends on it, and over time, something subtle happens. You stop asking what could change. You start focusing on what must continue. Because the machine has to keep running, and the machine is your lifestyle. No one builds this thinking about decades. They think about monthly numbers. A payment here, a subscription there, a slightly higher rent that still feels manageable. That's manageable. That word appears everywhere. Manageable rent, manageable payment, manageable upgrade. Each decision feels small on its own. Each adjustment fits inside the current paycheck. So nothing feels dangerous. But manageable quietly assumes stability. Stable income, stable energy, stable circumstances. It assumes the rhythm of your life keeps moving the same way. But life rarely stays that predictable. Careers shift, companies change, energy fluctuates, unexpected pauses appear, and by the time those changes arrive, something important has already happened. Your fixed costs have accumulated. Every payment now makes a quiet claim on your future. Not dramatic, not urgent, just constant. Month after month. The structure slowly tightens around the income that supports it. This is when behavior begins to shift. Income might still be strong. Nothing dramatic has happened. But something inside your decision-making starts to tighten. You begin filtering choices through one quiet question. Will this disturb the structure? You don't say it out loud. You just feel it. An opportunity appears, lower salary, more interesting work, a chance to try something different. For a moment, you feel curious, maybe even excited. Then another thought appears. Will this disrupt everything I built? You pause. Not because you lack courage, because continuity matters now. Your baseline is heavier than it used to be. Another possibility appears. A move to a different city. A temporary reset. Maybe a role with more flexibility. Again, you hesitate. Not fear, structure. The lifestyle you built quietly expects stability. And stability begins shaping how you respond to uncertainty. Your language changes too. I'm being practical. This is the smart move. Now isn't the time. And sometimes those things are true. But something else is happening underneath. The structure is narrowing your range. Decisions that once felt possible now feel expensive. Risk sounds louder than it used to. Time horizons shorten. Security becomes the priority. And slowly, without announcing it, ambition begins to resize. But this is the scary part that most people don't think about. Imagine something simple. Income pauses. Not forever, just 6 months. At first, it doesn't feel dramatic. Month 1 feels manageable. You tighten a few small things. You skip a dinner out. You delay a purchase. You tell yourself this is temporary. Month 2 feels different. You start checking your banking app more often. Not panic, just calculation. Payments that once felt invisible become noticeable. Rent, subscriptions, automatic charges leaving your account. Month 3 changes something deeper. Your tone shifts. You stop talking about what you're building. You start talking about what you need to protect. Plans become smaller. Month 4 grows quieter. Sleep gets lighter. You become careful with uncertainty. Your world hasn't collapsed, but it has narrowed. Choices that once felt open now feel expensive. Time feels tighter. That narrowing has a name. Compression. Not visible crisis. Invisible tightening. Because even when income pauses, the structure you built keeps running, and it still requires income. Let's take this into a real-life scenario. 2 people can earn the same salary. One requires very little to live. The other requires most of it. Who feels more pressure when disruption arrives? Not the one earning less. The one whose baseline is heavier. A heavy baseline changes behavior. Risk feels louder. Timelines feel shorter. Security feels urgent. You didn't become irresponsible. You became dependent. Dependent on continuity, and you're trapped. Now this becomes personal. If income paused tomorrow, how long before your thinking changed? Not your lifestyle. Your thinking. 3 months? 6? 30 days? Most people answer that question faster than they expect, because somewhere inside, you already know the number. That number is your margin. Margin changes how you move through the world. When margin is wide, your body feels different. You breathe a little easier. You take more time before saying yes. You question things more freely. You imagine different paths. But when margin is thin, your behavior tightens. You become careful, predictable, agreeable, reliable. You start protecting the structure that protects your life. Nothing dramatic happened, no collapse, no crisis. But slowly, quietly, the range of your life began to narrow. You are trapped. No easy escape on the horizon, no oxygen to breathe. The trap seems to be inescapable. The worst part is that you may have already been trapped, without being aware of it, until a life event happens, and then you realize that you are trapped. My friend Maya is in her mid-30s, good career, beautiful apartment, prestige job. From the outside, everything looks stable, successful even. One evening, a colleague calls, a smaller company, lower salary, higher upside, more ownership, more freedom. For a moment, she feels energized, alive, like the version of herself she imagined years ago is still possible. Then she opens her budgeting app. The numbers technically work, but there's no margin, no mistakes allowed, no room for a slow quarter. Her chest tightens. She declines, not because the opportunity was bad, because experimentation became expensive. My cousin Daniel is in his early 40s, 2 incomes, large home, kids in travel sports. Everything appears stable, predictable, well-constructed. Then one income disappears, they aren't broke. But the structure tightens immediately. Monthly numbers start dominating conversations. Vacations disappear from the calendar. Dreams quietly get postponed. Refinancing appears. Daniel abandons a career pivot he has considered for years, not because he wanted to, because the house payment requires continuity. My gym partner Lena is in her late 20s, strong income, high-rise apartment, designer furniture, weekend trips. Everything looks impressive online. Friends assume she's thriving, then her company restructures. Her role survives, but something becomes clear. She calculates her expenses for the first time in months. The result surprises her. She cannot survive 3 months without income. Not because she earns too little, because she requires too much. For the first time, she feels exposed. I know what you are thinking. What if I am trapped? I won't be trapped for life. I will have more money in 5 to 10 years when I have a better career, a better job, and better income. However, what you don't see is that while trapped, optionality is non-existent. Optionality doesn't look impressive, it doesn't show up in photos, it doesn't signal status. Most people can't see it from the outside, but it quietly changes everything. Optionality is the ability to pivot without panic, to leave a job that no longer fits, to pause when life demands it, to rebuild something new without your world collapsing underneath you. When your structure is loose, uncertainty feels possible. You can experiment. You can explore different directions. You can tolerate temporary instability. But when structure becomes tight, uncertainty feels threatening. Every deviation feels expensive, every experiment feels risky. And over time, something subtle happens. You adapt to the structure. You stop imagining certain versions of your future, not because they're unrealistic, because they quietly became too expensive to attempt. Picture a normal Tuesday evening. Nothing is wrong. Bills are paid. Your life works because it has to. The routines run smoothly. The payments clear. The calendar stays full. From the outside, everything looks stable, responsible, successful even. And yet a quiet question appears. If I wanted to change something, could I? Not theoretically, practically. Could you slow down for a while? Could you walk away from something that no longer fits? Could you pause long enough to rebuild a different direction? If your chest tightens thinking about that, that's not weakness, that's structure. Structure changes emotion. Once life requires constant performance, rest feels risky. Curiosity feels indulgent. Ambition starts to feel dangerous. You become excellent at stability, reliable, predictable, capable of keeping everything running. Years pass. Nothing collapses, nothing explodes. But something slowly hardens, and eventually you notice something subtle. You optimized your life for preservation more than possibility. The lifestyle didn't just shape your spending, it shaped what you consider realistic. The apartments you believe you need, the routines you assume must continue, the level of income your life quietly expects every month. That's why the trap is quiet. It rarely feels reckless. It whispers something softer. You can afford it. And technically, you can. The numbers work. The payment clears. The upgrade looks reasonable until interruption arrives. An interruption always arrives eventually. A career shift, a company restructuring, a health surprise, a slowdown you didn't plan. In those moments, the question changes. It's no longer about income. It's about structure. How heavy is the life you built? How much income does it require just to remain stable? Because the heavier your baseline becomes, the faster your world tightens when disruption appears. Options shrink, decisions become defensive, and freedom begins to feel expensive. But the opposite is also true. When your baseline is lighter, something changes. Interruptions feel survivable. Experiments feel possible. Time opens up again. That's why freedom was never really about earning more. It was about requiring less. Not minimalism, not deprivation, just margin. The trap forms slowly. One upgrade at a time. One manageable decision at a time. And the exit forms the same way. One reduction, one pause. One decision not to raise your baseline every time income rises. Over time, the structure loosens. Pressure softens. Options return. And the quiet power you lost begins to come back. The same way the trap formed. Quietly. And one day you notice something small. You can finally make a decision without fear of what it will cost your life to change it. That's when you know the structure no longer owns you.